The piece that was missing for me for so very, very long was the embodiment. Really to like hold focus on that and bring that relationship, that primary relationship, to bring that into the entirety of who and what I am, was just wildly transformative. So I had a mentor friend of mine who had been in a yoga class, and they were using your coherent body principles in the yoga class. And she said to me, she said, Jacquie, I just think you're really going to resonate with this work. And she goes, it's a small book. It's easy to follow. I was like, okay. And I'm always game for trying. And I got it and I started going through it. And it literally was the building blocks that I was missing, that I hadn't made the connections in my own awareness to, or in my own consciousness to, and to be able to build from the ground up and just allow that to become this new foundation for the relationship that I was coming back to within my body, because that was really the piece that's been missing for me for a long time. And I had tried to come in through so many other avenues, and this was simple. It was, the amount of time that I needed to commit to it wasn't something dramatic. I could be standing in front of the kitchen sink and put myself into all of the positions. And it was an almost immediate thing for me to realize. It was like, oh, wow, you get all of these pieces in alignment, and suddenly everything just relaxed, but felt sturdy at the same time. So it was a really eye-opening experience for me. And I worked with your book and your videos, I don't know, maybe only 9 months now or something like that. But it's the thing that I've kept coming back to. And I've had a lot of people ask me about it. Like, what happened? Why are you walk different, you carry yourself different. And yeah, that's a lot of what I got out of the work. That started to happen even already with the book. You have enough pieces in there with all the video links and everything like that. It was just a really simple process for me to adopt. And I found too, it was like, oh, I could play with it and find it within myself when I hit that sweet spot. Working with the book, because it's laid out, it's very clear and very simply. And I found that I didn't have to start at the beginning of the book and work my way through linearly. It was like, oh, this is what I have going on today. And I went back in and I referenced the book. The elastic breathing was fantastic for me, because that was something that I've really struggled with for a long time. I'm someone that has held so much tension in the body, and I didn't even realize that. And so even before reading your book and taking this course, I had to really spend some time focusing on recognizing that I was tense constantly. I would go to yoga or I would go to Pilates and I would perform, right? But I never turned anything off. And I didn't, for the longest time, know how to do that. And it's still something that I work on. And what I found with the coherent body process was I wasn't focusing on that. It wasn't something that I was running through my mind, trying to figure out how to let go. It gave me the experience of, if you do these steps and build them in this order in the body from the ground up, you have an immediate sense of, like, you just come back to yourself. Or I did, and I inhabited the body. And so that was incredibly profound. So that was super encouraging. And then when the email came through about the class, that was an immediate yes. Like, I didn't even have to think about it. And in fact, I signed up for it before I actually paid too much attention to what the focus of this particular class was. But it was so fantastic, because I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. It brought everything to just another level. And I think that happens when you're in a group container anyway, when there's, everybody's focused in on the same thing. And then just listening to you. I mean, there were a few times where you just made these fine little points and adjustments, and it clicked. And then I had a real deepening experience of the whole process. So yeah, that coherence, it's amazing. I have to say that some of the other things that help me probably prime the well to meet those moments in the class as thoroughly as I did, I have practiced and I teach yoga nidra now because of the amount of practice. And it's such a great relaxation practice that is also interwoven with awareness, and it brings you into the feeling body in a way that is so gentle and so guided that it allowed me to probably access a lot of the felt experiences more deeply. So I'm a huge proponent of Yoga Nidra. I'm actually also certified in a writing process called gateless writing, and it helps you still the critical mind. And even if the mind doesn't become still, it teaches a practice where you go through and you befriend the clutter, the chatter, et cetera, et cetera. But the way you look at it and the way you review it after it's been written befriends the self, and it suspends the judgment and the criticism. And I know that there's just so much of that around embodiment and just how we approach our lives and what we've been taught to do and taught to believe.
It sounds like you had experience practicing being present with sensations in your body, just to be aware of them. And that's a practice in itself to understand and cultivate that skill. But you also had the skill of being able to reflect on yourself through processing through words, which is another piece that can confuse things for people because they'll use concept words to describe what's happening in their body. So already they disconnect from what's happening in the body by saying things like, instead of saying that I feel pulsing in my chest, they say, I feel anxious. And that's a term that's abstract. And so through your writing process and through that training, did that help you articulate embody things, or how did that work?
Yes, it really allowed me to just to linger with what was there, right? Because the prompting from the writing was to become very detailed. And that did just help identify where the feeling was in the body and how it moved. And one of the other things when you were talking, it just reminded me of this. I also really enjoy like any sort of visual arts and creative expression. And one of the things that really unleashed my ability to recognize more of the feeling tone versus the language that gets assigned to it is I did an exercise at one point. I can't remember where I was first introduced to it, but when you allow those qualities or those feelings to become expressed through a creative, even if it's just a doodle, right? If you're feeling, let's just say you start with that anxiety, and then you start to bring in the qualities and the characteristics and the sensations that are with it, and you draw it out as a little doodle, even though you're not drawing it for anybody else, you're drawing it for yourself. There's something about the ability to see that and experience it at the same time that starts to knit everything together.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that we have two tracks. One's a functional track and one's an aesthetic track.
Mhm.
And what you're learning here is to be in a functional body, but do it aesthetically. There are two different tracks, I think, because when people stutter, for instance, to get over their stutter, they shift into the aesthetic track, which is to speak more fluidly as if they're singing. So they're more melodic in how they talk. So they lose their stutter when they talk like that. And it's
Yeah.
really, really powerful. And same thing with like Parkinson's. When they're walking, they are shaking and unsteady and sometimes frozen. But when they learn to cross their midline in time to music for aesthetic expression, they move with grace. And so it's like with their separate redundant tracks that can serve you. It's a beautiful kind of backstop that we have.
Oh, yeah, I agree entirely. I mean, I love it, and it really kind of brings us back into that wholeness where we're able to move between those two tracks. And it was funny, I was walking my dogs this morning and I look over and I have two little miniature Aussies and I'm watching them and they're both just sashaying. And
Uh-huh.
suddenly I realized, I was like, oh, my entire gait and how I was walking changed as well. I was like, wow, I'm feeling very fluid in my body today. And it was just a lovely thing. It wasn't heavy, it wasn't plodding, it was, and we were moving at a good pace, but it's kind of that like jumping the track from like, just straight ahead, rote, go, go, go to, oh, here's this aesthetic track where it's just more fluid. So yeah, that was good. One of the other things I wanted to tell you, when we were in the class, you had prompted us, and it's in the book as well, to listen from our sternum. And when I was reading it in the book, I didn't catch the magic of that. But when we were in the class and you said, listen from there, and then I can't remember exactly what you said, but it was basically like, oh, it brings you into the body. And as I've been working with that since the class is completed, I was like, wow, that just really brings you in and holds you in place in another way and allows sound to come in, which is also so amazing. So, yeah, this is the gift that I've given myself that's going to keep on giving. So, it's very good.
Yeah. And if you listen from the front of your spine, as you listen to my words right now, really
Yeah,
deep in the deep
yeah,
surface of the spine, if you listen from there and feel the vibration, and even as you listen to me, once you respond and talk to me, if you speak from that place, you feel a different resonance
yeah,
in your expression and also a different organization and how you attend to the person that you're speaking with.
yeah, yeah.
So can you talk about some of the other things that have happened for you since taking that intro course?
Well, the first thing that happened was I found my tongue, which we had discussed in the class, and it came out of the blue. And I literally was so, and I wanted to get so excited, but I also wanted to just stay with it. So I literally just allowed myself to slow down. I was walking again with the dogs, and I just slowed down and I just literally tracked the movement of relaxing the tongue and how it literally just went down and throughout my entire body. And that's something that I've continued to come back to. I mean, I do it now when I drive. I was practicing yoga nidra the other day and I was like, oh, wow, what happens when I just allow it to be kind of in the bowl of my mouth and everything, it starts to move and my eyes softened back into their sockets and my ears relaxed and my jaw was relaxing. And that was absolutely tremendous. The other thing that I notice a lot, and it's something that I think I'm coming into a little bit of more of a finessed relationship with. I like to hike a lot. And so when I hike, when you align yourself with the three keys and you're paying attention to the movement of the pelvis, I have an entirely different relationship to my sure-footedness in
Mm,
hiking. Out here in Arizona, there's a lot of gravel on the trails and they're not smooth. So there's always that kind of unsteady surface that I'm walking on. And there's something about it that is just like, oh no, right? It's like, it too is this sturdy yet fluid experience that I really enjoy. And how all of that really translates for me into my day-to-day life and my relationships. I have to say that I feel much more confident in myself to stand up, to, speak my piece, not to hold my tongue, and to really inhabit the space of me.
mm,
And that was something that it was a mystery to me, but it's been unfolding over these last number of years now that I've been really just focused on embodiment and what that really is, right? It's not this imagined thing. I think the other thing too is when you're embodied and you allow yourself to feel, it's not like you're not using the mind, but the mind becomes, it's in right relationship, and whatever the next movement is going to be, it arises up out of the awareness within the body. And that is like really crucial too. So I deeply appreciate that, because that's been very transformative.
Yeah, that gives you a certain level of trust that you don't have to be on it. Like you
Yes.
don't have,
And also that you don't have to be in constant protective or defensive mode. I think that so many of us are in a constant state of fight or flight, or at least defendedness. We're always waiting for something to rattle us. And when you're in that coherent state and you're really solidly in your body and on your own feet, things come as they do in life. And it's just more like this versus
exactly.
totally being thrown for a loop.
Right, right. So you can step to the side, or you can shift your weight, or you can just move a little, and then that thing that's coming at you goes by you.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, this is kind of a funny thing too. I was walking yesterday with my dogs, and my neighbor and her dogs came along, and the dogs started, they were all running off leash. And I had said to her, I'm like, watch out. The larger of my two dogs likes to run up at the end of playing and wants to sit right next to you, but sometimes misjudges, and she'll knock your feet out from under you. And sure enough, it happened to me and I went down. But it was interesting to me because I was very present as this was happening, and how I even landed was different. Like
Mhm.
I thought for sure I was going to have a bruised knee and a bruised hand, and nothing. I mean, literally nothing. So yay for that trust,
Yes.
even in falling.
Yes, yes, yes. That's fantastic because it shows up in so many ways to be in that relationship with your body, with gravity. So even as you're falling, you still have a relationship with gravity. It's just changing, and you're using the whole of yourself instead of trying to support yourself and keep yourself upright. You're feeling the internal support and shifting through it as you fall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that gravity piece you just reminded me too. Like I found that immensely transformative as well. I mean, we all know gravity, right? We've all been exposed to that concept. But to really understand the force, this invisible force that is always, always, always holding us, that when that imprinted itself, I think that was one of the things that really like opened another doorway for me, is that I can trust that.
Yes.
It's not a question. I can trust that. And the more I came into my body, the more that relationship, you can feel it when you walk, right? That up and then the back down, and the up and the back down. And just, I know that these are a lot of nuances, but this was really important to me, that I couldn't have continued on my trajectory without these pieces. This was for me, the embodiment was the piece that has been most recent to really kind of come online. So, to say that it happened just like this would be a misnomer. I mean, I had a cancer journey about 10 years ago, and that was really the first thing that forced me to come into the body. And then once I realized, I was like, I can't escape this. I have to come into a relationship to this. That's when it was like, oh, wow, this body, it didn't fail me. The body didn't fail me. It was a lot of thoughts and conditions and, things like that. And so it's been this 10 years, and now this came. And I was a firm believer that things come to you when the time is right. So, the last 9 months, I was clearly ready for this.
Is perfect. It's really how I hope people find this, go through the journey, work through the book a little bit on your own, come do a live intro course, or come into the full 12-month course so that you can get the nuances of it, all the different angles of it, because from the interiority of your own body, there's so many different ways to feel it, learn it, embody it.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, in reading the book, you and your presence come through that beautifully, but there is definitely a magic that happens when we get to have interaction with you in person, even if it's over Zoom, because there's a whole nother level of the energy of this entire program that gets infused into this. And I know that also contributed greatly to the experience. So just want to acknowledge that.
Oh, great, thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to add or share in terms of like the outcomes or anything else?
Well, I would just encourage people to stick with it, right? I think that the thing, it's not fast. You don't do this. I didn't do this fast. I really committed myself to it. I found it. I started to read it and it resonated. And I was like, oh, okay, I can do this. Like I can literally do this. And it felt as though the practice was meeting me halfway. And like I said, it's not a hugely time consuming thing. But if you become intrigued by it and if you give it your attention in these simple ways throughout the day, there's that sort of breakthrough. It always comes when you're least expecting it. I didn't expect that it was going to be my tongue.
Right, yeah, this is the
Really, I'd never thought much about my tongue before. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, I love you, tongue.
right? Specific cues come together and then they make a geometrically impactful change that's not a sum of its parts and it's not conditional upon X number of repetitions or doing it for X number of
Yeah,
months or days. It's really about that time where it's going to hit you pretty clearly that this is a big change.
it is. Yeah, I agree. And I think the change, the shift happens when the mind is not involved. Like I noticed that. It was like I literally just needed to do this enough times until my body understood what I that I was serious about this and I was coming back.
Mm.
And that for me has been really how I approach a lot of things now. It's like, now, if it has that resonant tone that I'm looking for, if it's approachable, if it isn't a whole lot of complexity, if there's a simplicity to it, then work with it, like, and keep working with it. And that has been really fantastic. So yeah, I'm a huge fan.
Great. All right. So, do you want to talk more about what you're doing?
Yeah, so I have started something that is called the Wildcrafted Mystery School, and it's a holistic approach to spiritual awakening, but through the path of embodiment. And as I said, the embodiment piece was the thing that I just struggled with for the longest time. And so not too long ago, I realized I'm like, wow, we're all this mystery embodied. And each one of us is here as an aspect of that. And we're literally opening to and unraveling the mystery of our lives as we meet these moments through embodiment. We do a lot of embodiment practices, creative practices, writing practices, a lot of yoga nidra. So I've basically just taken all of these different modalities that have worked for me, that have brought me back into this space. And I use them to help guide and facilitate gatherings for people to explore and see if it turns out to be something that works for them. And I think too, if we really want to simplify this down, it's like, it's about becoming receptive
Yes. Hmm.
and then allowing life to move through us. These are invisible forces, right? Gravity is not something we see. Gravity is something we feel. Our feelings are invisible. They're not something we see. They're something we feel. These are the creative life force moving through us. And as we become more and more receptive to that without judging it or criticizing it or denying it and pushing it away, we become much more able to hold greater and greater amounts of that life force and express ourselves as that. Like we become these vessels. I mean, it's just the juiciest thing ever.
Right.
There's not even enough good words to like really describe that
Right,
because
right.
it's just you've when you've had that once, you will know it forever because you just feel like yourself and you just want that more and more. And as you, it's easy to start with things that feel good, which I highly recommend, by the way. But then once you start doing that where it feels good, it's like, well, what if I take this to something that I have said doesn't feel so good? And I leave that story outside the door and I just allow myself to have that. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, this is all life. This is what it is to be alive. This is life moving through me. It's how I can approach things. It's how I can attend to things. It's how I love on things. It's, yeah.
So awesome. You know, the image for me is I make myself into like a vessel, like just a vessel when I'm doing cranial on people in particular. So I just let it come through me. And it's a really great practice because it, no matter like what happened just before, if something was difficult, I could just bring myself to that practice of being a vessel. And when you have something that you're doing, whether it's a craft or whether it's a profession or whether you're working with a medium and I'm working with someone else's body, that it puts that demand of you to show up in a certain way. And
Mhm.
what's harder is if you don't have a vessel, if you don't have some sort of container to explore that, when you're doing it in the context of writing, or if you're doing it in the context of creating a piece of work, maybe like with clay or knitting or something, then you have something that is able to, you could practice working with those invisible forces. But if you don't have the practice, then it's a little hard, right? If it's more general, like self-development or personal relationships, it doesn't quite narrow the focus so that you can really be clear about what's happening.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because as I was just listening to you, I think this is where a lot of people get stuck. They have the concept, right? And they stay inside the concept instead of when you have a craft or a practice, you can take the concept there. And as you begin to work with whatever it is, it becomes the mirror, right?
Yeah.
And it can help you. I mean, even the frustration, right? Let be that container for the frustration right now. Just let the whole frustration come in, take up the space. It will move on. It doesn't stay forever. But yeah, so I think that as many different mediums as we can possibly find is probably a really great thing. And everybody's going to find the mediums that work
Yeah.
best for them. The creative cycle is so rich, and really that's what this all is the creative life force, and it doesn't move
Exactly.
the same way twice. Why would it?
It's a creative impulse, like allowing that to come through because, you know, you could get a little narcissistic when you really go inside and internal, and you could get very neurotic about your own body when you're working with your body. But if you have that bigger intention to guide you, and for me, there was a point where I felt myself getting very neurotic about the body. There's so much detail that you can learn, and people learn like all the minutia, and they forget the bigger thing. Like, what is the bigger thing? Like, what is this vehicle for? And for me, it was to let that creative impulse come through by expanding the bandwidth, dropping everything down to that lower brain to process in the way it can do really well, and then allowing that conscious thinking to really put forth something that emerges from that creative wellspring.
Yeah, I think too, as you were talking, I was thinking back. One of the other things that's really important is to realize that we're not the body,
Mhm.
right? It's its own being. It's its own being. And so when we're doing all of this through the body, that's like a partnership. And when we come into right relationship in that way, and then you sing and the body sings with you, then there's no narcissism there. This is just, I mean, bliss. But it takes some doing to get to that. I mean, when you look at just the overculture and our conditioning, and oh my gosh, particularly as women, with all of the stuff that we're sold for what we should look like, and how we should do things, and et cetera, to kind of come into that relationship, not kind of, but to actually come into that relationship with the body where there's an honoring that takes place, and to understand that it knows. And I'm the beneficiary of that knowing. That is something quite amazing. And that was a hard one for me to learn, but I'm grateful. The hard teachers, the hard situations, in hindsight, you can look back and go, wow, like that was something. That was an experience that I don't want to do again, but I'm so grateful that I walked through it, and that I walked through it and I turned over every little stone that I could to meet every moment as well as I could in that period of time, and that the body met me every single time right where I was, and I met it right where it was.